It really is the golden age of technology for composers. I mean, we have instant access to terabytes worth of sounds. We can collaborate with anyone we want from across the globe in real time. We can learn anything we want about the production process at any time of day from any number of resources. I mean, the Internet of Things has meant an explosion of opportunity. And with that, companies have begun to look for new ways of doing business, which brings us to subscription services. I'm afraid, from East West to Avid, software as a service is here to stay. But is that necessarily a bad thing? Do we have to own our own software? Well, we're going to talk about that, as well as listen to a cute and quirky chiptune cue from a member of the 52 Cues community on this week's episode of the 52 Cues podcast. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the 52 Cues podcast, a weekly podcast devoted to production and library music. Plus, we feature a cue written by a member of the 52 Cues community. Just what is the 52 Cues community? Well, we are a worldwide interactive network of composers and producers devoted to writing better production music through lifelong learning, mutual support, and encouragement to others along their journey. And we start and we focus on writing just one cue per week. So why don't you head over to 52cues.com and join us. Before we get started, I have to give a special word of thanks to the family, friends, and patrons of 52 Cues because we are 100% listener supported. Lots more about how you can support 52 Cues and the 52 Cues community at the end of the episode. And if you want to skip over today's topic and go right to the cue breakdown, we are going to be listening to Two-Player Power Up by 52 Cues community member John Chambers. Then be sure to check out the timestamps in the description below. But we're going to be starting first by talking about software as a service. And this is a super hot topic, and software as a service isn't necessarily anything new. I mean, I feel like Adobe started this first when they wrapped up, Photoshop and Premiere and InDesign and Illustrator. They wrapped it all up into a bundle that you could subscribe to. And my wife, Shannon, who is a graphic designer, she is a subscriber of the Adobe, I think it's called Creative Cloud, I believe. And she loves it and hates it, especially since they include a lot of software that she doesn't necessarily need. But on the other hand, access to all of these resources, access to all of this software, access to font libraries and stock images that would otherwise be prohibitively expensive. And as a professor at Full Sail, I also have access to the Creative Cloud, and so I use Adobe Premiere and Photoshop and all of these other things, and I really do like having it. And so I feel like Adobe was kind of first on the scene when it came to software as a service, but it wasn't long before plugin manufacturers got hip to this. And whether they were first or not, I feel like the first shot across the bow for software as a service was the Composer Cloud by East West. East West, it's like $19.99 a month or $200 or $20 a month, or you can pay annually and save a little bit of money. And I jumped on this almost immediately. I was so hip to this, because they included, at the time, every library that they made, every sound that they have ever produced, they offered for a subscription. It was just the gold tier, so it wasn't like all of the mic positions, and it wasn't, the platinum or diamond or whatever. They offered for a reasonable rate, like $20. And as an educator, I got an educational discount, and I was also like an early adopter. And so it was an absolute no-brainer. And for the longest time, I recommended Composer Cloud to anyone who was looking to get into good sounds on the cheap. And I listed a number of sounds as a benefit to Logic Pro when I did my DAW talk, because Logic just has so many sounds that it comes, 72 gigs just in the box. And so that's a huge benefit. And Composer Cloud, I think I did the math one time, and it would take 16 years of paying their subscription, like every month, it would take 16 years to start to get upside down. Meaning that you have now paid more over 16 years than you would have if you just bought all of their libraries, their retail price of their libraries, and downloaded them all. And it was an absolute no-brainer. But you had to get into their, they have like a downloader tool. And so you had to get into the installation center, which could be a little fussy, because that was also the internet authenticator, which, again, when I talked in my DAW talk, I talked about how companies need to start leveraging the internet and internet remote digital authentication so we could get freaking away from iLocks and Steinberg keys. And I have since learned that Cubase has moved away from that, and that's fantastic. I'm well on board with that. But Composer Cloud had an installer, and that's what did the handshake with the server to authenticate for DRM purposes, and so you're not like stealing, and pirating software and everything. And it was all great for a pretty long time, because in addition to getting everything that East West ever made, you also got new libraries. And so whenever, Voices of Opera came about, or Hollywood Pop Brass came about, then it would just show up in your installation center. And the only thing you were limited by was the amount of space on your hard drive. And boy, did you need lots and lots of hard drive space. And so it was really good for a while. But then Composer Cloud X came about, because they realized that folks are going to want a subscription service to pay for all of the mic positions. And so there were these tiers. So for X number of dollars a month, you got the gold. And then if you wanted all of the mic positions, and it was another subscription service. It was another tier up, like 25 or 30 bucks a month or something like that. I didn't need all of that because I don't really drill down that much. Not when I'm doing production music. I don't think it necessarily calls for all the time that kind of granular control over your orchestrations. Usually it's all ensemble patches. And so I didn't really get into it. I just let it go. It's fine. It's fine. Everything else is great. All of the gold mic positions are fine for me. But then last year, they came out with Composer Cloud X, or Composer Cloud Plus, because I think they realized that all of those things were kind of fussy. Like there's Composer Cloud, then there's X, and now there's like Plus, and it got really much of a headache. Who had what mic position? So they said, you know what, we're doing away with all of that. We're going to grandfather all of those subscriptions into their own thing, and let's get you over to Composer Cloud Plus, which was a huge bargain. It was like $120, I think, for the year. And it was literally everything. All of the mic positions for less than I was paying. And I'm like, yes, I am way on board with that. And so I downloaded it, and all was well in the world. I closed my subscription to the regular Composer Cloud, and all was great until I went to open a session with the old Composer Cloud. Or well, I didn't realize it was old at the time. But I opened up the session, and suddenly, hey, we can't find Hollywood Percussion Gold. I'm like, well, you don't need gold. I have diamond. I have everything. Well, come to find out that in order to get everybody off of these gold licenses and onto the diamond licenses, they issued new license keys, which effectively broke every plugin that had different mic positions. Every instance of any Hollywood percussion, Hollywood brass, Hollywood strings, gold was now broken. Broken. Because Hollywood Diamond wasn't, these diamond licenses weren't expansions of the gold. They were new licenses. So I'm like, oh, wait. This is, whoever pulled the trigger on this, should have been much more upfront in the documentation when you're subscribing to this. Hey, this is fixing to happen, just so you know. Nope. And if it did, then it was some fine print and I missed it, getting all caught up in the fever of Black Friday sales or something, which is possible. So, but I get on the chat with them, and I'm, support ticket, and I'm like, hey, my Hollywood percussion gold is broken. Specifically, like I have Anvil. I love the Anvil patch and all that stuff. It's great. It's great. Love it. And they're like, yeah, we know. I felt like they had told that story many times. And so they immediately turned around and gave me a 90-day subscription or a 90-day license for Hollywood Gold, for those gold libraries. Why they just couldn't grandfather me into those gold libraries, I don't know. I don't know, because it's just a line of code in the database. It's not like they were boxing up and shipping off another library to me. But they closed my previous gold subscription and opened the diamond subscription. So they gave me 90 days. That's great. Well, 90 days has come and gone. They said, I'll give you 90 days so you can rebuild everything. But the reality is I've kind of forgotten. I mean, I've got hundreds of cues written. I've long since forgotten which exact library is what. Do they honestly expect me to open up every single session I've ever written to check and see if that has an instance of Hollywood brass? If they honestly think that, then they are delusional. This is turning into much more of a rant. I promise I have a point. This is all going somewhere. And so it's been 90 days, and sure enough, I recently opened up a session and it's broken again because I didn't think to check that session. And it's mega frustrating, which brings me to one of the biggest issues I have with software as a service, which is you're not owning the software. And I don't even want to yet kind of talk about, the conception of that and owning software. I mean, I think we'll touch on it here in a minute, but you are completely at the mercy of whatever the software vendor does. And my wife, Shannon, who is a Composer Cloud, a Creative Cloud, Adobe Creative Cloud member, she had this happen, but instead of like a percussion library, it was a font. For whatever reason, Adobe chose to discontinue this license for a font. And I didn't realize, I was talking with her just before I recorded. She did the math. This was a font for a client, and the Creative Cloud stopped carrying that font. And so now suddenly any fonts which weren't rendered into images, or vectorized or whatever, would break. Kind of like with us, I would need, if you're stopping a subscription, you'd have to bounce everything into place. It's the font version of bouncing into place. And so that font is just gone. It's just gone from her system. And so she looked at the math on if she wanted to buy those fonts. It was going to cost her like $1,600. $1,600 for the font suite for that client. And she's like, no, I can't do that. So the value added is huge, but ultimately you are at the mercy of the software vendors. And that right there is the crux of software as a service that you have to get your brain around. Now, why is this even coming up today of all days? Why is it coming up this week? Well, two reasons. First of all, Musio, aka Cinesamples, has just come out with their subscription service. For $20 a month, you essentially get all of the Cinesamples libraries. And there are quite a lot of them. There are a lot of sounds, which is pretty hip. What's unusual about Musio isn't actually that unusual. Instead of using a licenser to handshake individual software or individual library licenses, aka the installation center from East West, instead, Musio, which I downloaded and I'm running a trial right now, I might do a video on it, but Musio has a rack plugin. And that rack plugin not only plugs in directly into your DAW, just has one single plugin called Musio, but you also have to run another little piece of software, I think, that does the handshake with the authentication servers, I guess in real time. Or it enables you to download directly. So you don't download sounds all onto your hard drive necessarily and then plug them into Logic or Ableton or Pro Tools. Instead, you load in Musio, and when you say, hey, I like this sound, I like drums of war or handbells, then it goes and finds the sounds off of the server and downloads them. And you can put them into this rack, this kind of virtual rack, and load them all in, which is reminiscent of another software subscription service, Reason Plus. When Reason pluginification, if that is that a word? When they turned their Reason Rack into a plugin that can get used with any DAW, that was huge for me. It got me back on the Reason train because I love all of Reason's sounds. I love their workflow. I gushed on Reason a couple of weeks ago in my DAW video. So I love using the Reason Rack. And so the Musio Rack very much reminded me of the Reason Rack. And Reason has since come out with their subscription service, $20 a month. You cancel at any time if you want, but when you cancel, the software stops working. And so if you want to keep on using it, if you want to go back to software from 5 years ago or a queue from 5 years ago, you need to still have that subscription going if you haven't rendered things into place. But just like East West, Reason Plus will add new sounds and new packages and sound packs and all of these things. So the value, I think, is enormous. But Reason, like I said, Reason runs in a little rack similar to the way that now Musio does. But the problem is, and one of the problems of using this kind of rack service, and I'm going to have to get my brain around it. When I download, and I have Cinebrass, and I can load up the 2-horn ensembles, and I could use like key switching. But the way that the Musio rack works, each articulation is essentially loaded into its own rack space. And so I'm sure you can. I haven't figured it out, but to be able to key switch isn't there. And so you have to have each articulation into its own lane, and that can get a little fussy. But I also see the appeal of being able to put all of your sounds onto a rack. So I have, similar to the way that you can, build templates in BBCSO or whatever. Here is this template, and then load that in. I have yet to really put Musio through its paces, but I see the power there. I see the appeal. And for $20 a month to be able to have access to anything that Cinebrass or Cinesamples puts out, let me see if I can't dig up the listing. There was a listing somewhere of what instruments are included. Yes, Here we are. What instruments are in Musio? And this isn't a Musio commercial. I'm not sponsored by them. I'm just really, really excited. So yeah, the entirety of the Cinebrass library, all of the Cinestrings, and you can see all violin 1, 2, violas, cellos, basses. But as you can see, they are all broken down into their individual articulations, which means that you would have to load each one of those guys into their own little rack space, which is one of the beefs I have with East-West. I think their articulation management is overly fussy. And so you have all of Cinestrings, all of Cinewinds, all of the orchestral, the big Cineperk Metal, Cineperk Wood, Cineperk Tonal, Cineperk World, Aux, Cine Symphony, Light, Voxos, which is their choral, their Drums of War 1. I don't see Drums of War 2, which is interesting, but their Drums of War 1, the pipe organ, synth, mallets, handbells, piano in blue, Cineharp, which is really good. So you have a lot. Doesn't look like it's quite necessarily everything, but it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot. But like the lack of key switching, the lack of being able to go in with Musio and change out the mic positions. I didn't see a way to do that. And so I realize it's early for Musio. It's way early, but that's a big deal to have that kind of control, which I can have in a contact instrument. So Musio, I don't think it's quite there yet. Probably not gonna subscribe after my after my trial is up. I think it needs to catch up a little bit. Plus, I have a ton of these libraries already. Now with East-West, and I still subscribe to East-West, I didn't have any of those libraries. So the value was everything they made kind of wham, all instantly showed up. And those are all notifications from 52Q, so I should probably mute that. But with Musio, I have so many of those Cinesample sounds already. So it remains to be seen. It really remains to be seen. But the other really big shoe that dropped this week that massively put this on the table for me was AVID. AVID. Hey, AVID, can we talk for a minute? Hey, buddy. What are you doing? What are you doing? They came out with new pricing structure. So for like $10 a month, you can get Pro Tools Artist. For $32 a month, you can get Pro Tools Studios. Or for $100 a month, you can get Pro Tools Flex. And they limit the number of plugins that come available in with it. But they also limit the number of audio tracks and instrumental tracks and MIDI tracks that you can add to it. The number of mastering tracks. Video, you can't load video at all into the artist bundle, and recording inputs, multi-channel mixing. It's completely crazy, and I think it's overpriced, and I think they've massively missed the mark with this. Not to mention they put out a statement about M1 and silicon compatibility, and they basically said, we're so great. And the Pro Tools engine is so great, it doesn't need native M1 support. And what are you doing? What are you doing, AVID? So, and I know we just talked about it on, or just posted about it on the Instagram feed for 52Qs, but they're really absolutely missing the mark. And so I think this is how to do this wrong. $100 a month. $100 a month. So $1,200 just for 1 year to have the top level of the Pro Tools. $1,200 a year. Let's see if they offer an annual discount. See, I don't even know if they do. $1,000. Are you kidding me? $1,000 just for 1 year. for a DAW. Raise your hand. If you're driving, I want you to keep one hand on the steering wheel. Raise your hand if you think this is a good idea. I got to tell you, we have a music department chat for the folks at Full Sail, and it just blew up. Like, who in their right mind thinks this is a good idea? $1,000 for a DAW? Get out of my face. I think this is terrible. This is such a horrible idea. And I get professional HD surround sound and all of that. But this is just another instance of aviding on things and squashing the life out of it's just, anyway, it's a horrible, terrible idea. And this is the ugly side. This is like the anti-Composer Cloud. The Composer Cloud says, listen, for $20 a month, we're going to give you like 4 terabytes worth of sounds, and you can just have it all. Just have it all. Just take it. For $20 a month. Composer, for $120 for the first year, then I think it goes up to $200. For $200 a year, I have all of those sounds. Musio is like $150 a month or $50 a year. But for $1,000 a year, $1,000. And the Pro Tools Studio, let's look at that one. That is the mid-tier. That's $300 a year. Logic was $300 10 years ago, one time. So you're telling me, Avid, that you want me to pay $300 a year to have limited. This isn't I'm limited by the number of audio tracks. Now, will I ever put more than 512 audio tracks? Probably not. Be nice to know if I could. But why is there even a limit? Why is there even a limit? So that makes me angry and feels like abuse. It's abusing your customers. It's like they know that they have a loyal, entrenched fan base that they are just unashamedly taking advantage of. And it's no wonder. It's no wonder that other DAWs are eating their lunch. It's no wonder that Cubase is quickly becoming like the professional alternative. It's no wonder. And if you're from Avid, or if Avid ever listened to this, I kind of doubt they will, but let me know. Tell me in the comments why this is a good idea, because I don't see any value. Because you're giving all of the software as a service a terrible, terrible name by doing these really, really shady practices. Let's say that. So, my thesis, my closing arguments of this, software as a service is here to stay. And I think there are good ways to do it. I think that East West, for all of the issues that they have, right? They were first to the table. The plugins are individual. You don't have to run like its own rack instance. All the licenses are handshaked through their downloader and installation center. And I think that's the best it can be. Anytime a new plugin shows up, it shows up in my installation center. If I want it, I click it and I download it, make room on my hard drive. I think Musio, that's interesting, that single plugin, but I don't like the idea that I have to run another piece of software living up in my system tray just to be able to use your sounds. Not to mention key switching and mic positions and all of that. Reason, I like the idea that Reason is for their $20 a month, you're getting new sounds like every week. And I think like Arcade Output does the same thing. That's just one plugin that's a subscription, but I don't think it's $20 a month. but you're getting, new sounds all the time. There is value added to this every time you open it up. And it's a deep, deep ocean. You jump in, like you open up Composer Cloud and you're overwhelmed with your number of options. You open up Reason and you look at the rack and all of the add-on packs. You're overwhelmed by options. You open up Musio. You're overwhelmed by all of these things. And I think those are great. Avid, you're doing it wrong. You have lost your way. You have lost your way. Now, which version is right for you? What is for you? Do you need to own the software? For me, I'm okay not to. I love the fact that with Creative Cloud from Adobe, when a new version of Photoshop comes out, I update Photoshop. Done. I love that when Reason puts out a new pack, I can download it. I love with East West when they come out with a new plugin, a new vocal, voices of opera. I can download it if I want that. I love that. I don't feel the need to own my software because, like I said, it would take 16 years for me to get upside down. And that's assuming nothing changes. But not everybody's like that. And there are inherent risks that you have to balance for yourself. And so I encourage you to explore that. Subscription for a DAW, I don't think I would ever do that. Because that's not just a sound, right? When East West broke and I had a cue to write, all I did was swap out the sounds. It was inconvenient and I got ill about it, but it didn't break my day. It didn't break my workflow. It didn't keep me from making money and making a living, making music. But if my DAW goes down, then I'm in trouble. So at the end of the day, I'm okay paying subscriptions for plugins, for added sounds, Splice, also a subscription that I subscribe to. Happy with that. But if Logic were to come out tomorrow with a subscription service for Logic, or if Apple were to come out with a subscription for Logic, that would be the day that I download Cubase. But what about you? What do you think of subscription as a service? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that this is the death knell of all things capitalism, or are you down with it? Are you okay with software as a service? Please let me know in the comments below. So let's change gears just a little bit, and we are going to listen to a cue written by a member of the 52 Cues community. This is written by John Chambers, and this is a chiptune cue, and this is called 2-Player Power Up. We're going to take a listen to it and talk about it on the other side. John, man, I unapologetically love this. I kind of have a sweet spot for chiptunes anyway, but this just makes me so happy. And if you're listening to this and there's not somewhere inside you that smiles just a little bit, then you're dead inside. I think this is absolutely fantastic. Part of the reason I wanted to use this cue this week, this was one of several cues submitted for our week 16 thread, was I wanted to talk a little bit about chiptunes and always bringing something, wanting to bring something unique each week with these. But John, first of all, thank you so much for submitting it and for letting me use this. Again, this is called two-player power up. And chiptunes are really, really interesting. They're unapologetically throwback nostalgic, and there is a really large swath of composers who write chiptunes, and some of them actually use like Game Boy hardware or software emulators to write these. And of course, isn't there like Super NES Boy, or there's a software plugin, I think, from Impact Soundworks that does chiptuney kind of stuff like this. But one of the really cool things about chiptunes is that you are limited in the number of sounds you use and the types of sounds, and trying to get as much out of the very limited resources that your 8-bit or 16-bit consoles could do back in the day. Before you could like load in audio files and play those in real time, you had to use essentially super, super simple, basic synthesizers and trying to get as many sounds and textures as you could. And I think you absolutely nailed it. It sounds just, everything is working from a production music standpoint. Now, there's a very narrow lane for chiptunes in the production music world, but if you can find that library looking for chiptunes, then I think this is a home run. This is absolutely, because it doesn't sound like, and I don't mean this like pejoratively, but this doesn't sound authentic to like an 8-bit. This doesn't sound like it was created using that type of emulator or software. Instead, it sounds like a really lovingly crafted homage to those 8 and 16-bit systems. But from a production music standpoint, everything is happening for this cue. We've got our builds, we've got our layers, we even go kind of into a breakdown or a B section. And that's really my only beef with that. I think I would have liked to have heard the drums do something a little bit different here. Yeah, I think that's really. I think if we would have switched up the drum pattern a little bit, I think that could have been cool. The drum part sounded a little loopy, like a little bit too much. I love the bing, bing, bing. I probably would have brought those in a little earlier. But I love all the little vocal chops and vocal samples. Those could be an issue in a library, but you would submit a version. You would submit a version without the vocal, or if you weren't planning on it, I absolutely would consider submitting a version without these little vocal samples. Leading up, hit that dominant 7. 7 chord. Yeah, really hit that 7 chord. That kind of Louie Louie, come on baby now, shake it up baby, twist and shout kind of stacking chord tones. Wants to go to the dominant 7. Oh, let me back that up. Little claps. I would have done a clap, 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 just to mix up that clap pattern just a little bit. Love the little octaves. Maybe do some pitch bending, some portamento between those. Some portamentos. That's something that is very indicative to that style, kind of intrinsic into that. I think that could have worked out really, really nice. But John, thank you so much. I think you absolutely have a 16-bit winner on your hands. And like I said, if you can find a library looking for these types of cues, then I would absolutely encourage you to submit your 8-bit silliness. This was submitted by John in our week 16 thread because every week we put out a search over at 52 Cues. This week we are collecting cues for week 17, and one of those cues I will feature. If that is something that you're interested in, why don't you head over to 52cues.com, join the community, and we would absolutely love to have you. But that's going to do it for us. Like I said at the beginning, 52 Cues is 100% supported by you, by the members of the 52 Cues community, either by subscribing to the 52 Cues. We do have different layers of support. Of course, you can join 52 Cues for free. It doesn't cost anything to be a part of the community. But if you want to give back as well as receive more from the 52 Cues community, including workshops, our music production live streams. I do a live interactive feedback session. I do a live, I have weekly live office hours, and we also have a mastermind group which meets for 12 straight weeks, and we really focus on mentoring and kind of career development. Then why don't you head over to 52cues.com and see the options available to you for the friends, the family, and the patrons of 52 Cues. Lots more information and links in the description below. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you had a fantastic week, and I hope you have a stellar rest of week 17. Until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2022 Dave Croft, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the 52 Cues community and submitting your cue for consideration on the podcast, head over to 52cues.com.